Okay, so tell me a little bit about mind size. You went through those three different sections of it, and then how does that all connect?
Yeah. So the first one is that in mind size, the focus is on really teaching the athletes to be able to train in a systematic way these skills, these mental skills that allow them to perform at their optimal performance more often and for longer periods of time. But you don't now take time away from your training anymore to develop the skills to then hopefully use it, or that they hopefully just kick in when you're, playing tennis or running or playing football. But like, you now have a systematic way, you know what to do. You might not be able to do it yet, but you can try to do it. And this act of trying to do the right thing with your mind is part of the process of repeating it. It's like you're a quarterback. You're trying to throw the football. That doesn't mean you're throwing it perfectly every time, but because you're trying to throw it to a certain spot, it doesn't end where it needs to be. You make an adjustment. That process of like trying to do one thing, adjusting to it, is the process that is required in order to improve that skill. It's exactly the same with the mind. Obviously, either one is much more complex than that, but just to, explain
Right.
the basic structure of like how this works.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that, because as I was in the early stages of trying to learn how to meditate, learn how to quiet my mind, someone whose mind is, constantly rolling, and for anyone that's a high achiever or someone that, has a lot going on in their mind, it feels like a lot of clutter at times. And that first step is being able to start, right? And it's not that you're going to get results right away. And I think that's what turns people off. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Like, you can't just meditate for a week or whatever and then expect that you may feel a little bit of difference in your life. But this is something that you have to cultivate on a consistent basis. It's just like if I work out for a week, I may feel good at the end of that week. But if I stop working out, you can't expect those results to continue to render results.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whenever you stop doing something that's good for you, it's not going to just continue being good for you. If you get fitter because you have been stretching a lot and doing a lot of yoga, and you're more flexible, and you do it, 3 times a week for 30 minutes, like, you will feel better and better eventually. If you stop doing yoga, you're going to get stiffer again. I mean, it's not a big complex thing to understand. It's the same with the mind, right?
Absolutely.
However, just to address one thing you mentioned with like calming the mind,
Yeah.
that's where some people get a little bit confused. Like, people feel like, ooh, if I meditate, my goal is to calm my mind, right? Or if I'm meditating the right way, my mind is calm. And if my mind is not calm, I'm not meditating, or I'm meditating the wrong way.
Right.
Well, that is one of the big misconceptions in the world when it comes to mindfulness meditation. Whether you are thinking and you have 100 quadrillion thoughts in your mind at the same time, racing at lightning speed, or you don't have a zip in your mind, it's just a blank. There's nothing to do whether you're meditating or not.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're doing a mindfulness meditation, when you are being mindful, that means you're using certain mental skills. It doesn't mean that you're having certain experiences. Having thoughts or not having thoughts is an experience you can perceive. You can be aware that there are thoughts, and you can be aware that there are no thoughts. But thoughts or no thoughts has nothing to do with your ability to notice. Okay? So the same thing with people being like, yeah, if I am sitting calm with my eyes closed, I'm meditating. If I'm moving with my eyes open, I'm not meditating. No, it has nothing to do with one another.
Right.
Like, you can practice with thoughts and without thoughts. You can practice in stillness and in motion. You can practice for 1 hour. You can practice for 10 seconds. Okay. The fact is that everybody is practicing all the time. Everybody's using those skills in their lives. You wouldn't be a functioning human being, a healthy functioning human being, if you would not have one of those 3 mindfulness skills, which is, the first skill is your ability to pay attention to whatever you want for any length of time. So you can now pay attention to what I'm saying. So you direct your attention here. Or you can now choose to direct your attention to watching your microphone. So that's an ability you have, right? If you wouldn't have that ability, can you imagine like how difficult it would be to survive, right? And there's people that have that and they have a hard time surviving. Like it's a survival skill.
Right.
The other ability is the ability to notice in real time what is actually happening. So once you direct your attention somewhere, willingly or not, for a second or an hour, you can notice details. You're aware of what you're noticing. So you might be directing your attention to what I'm saying, and now you are aware that my accent is, not American. And you might be aware that my voice goes up and down. And you might be aware that I'm talking and then there's moments of silence. So you're noticing details in real time while it's happening. Or you watch your microphone and you see it has a round shape and it has a certain color and so forth. So noticing details is awareness, clarity, noticing in real time what is happening within what you're paying attention to. Okay. And then the third skill is your ability to be okay with what you're experiencing, to not be like in a fighting relationship with life, so to speak.
Right.
Okay. And everybody has that too. You're not like, there are certain situations like what just happened that might be like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? Like, that's okay. You're maybe not super cool with that, but you also don't have like a big negative reaction to it. It's just like rolled with the punches. So it's a good example of like, oh yeah, like you're kind of accepting of what is happening right now and what just happened. And your ability to accept what happens allows you now to actually pay attention to what matters for this conversation here.
Right.
If you would not be able to accept what just happened, which you for sure also have experience in certain situations in your life, the result is that you're fighting with what happened or what is happening, and it grabs all your attention. And you actually couldn't pay attention to me at all because all of your paying attention to is like, oh, why did the internet connection not work? And like, oh, I had to move, and like, and you're not actually here anymore.
Right.
So you have these three skills, obviously.
Right.
You use those three skills all the time. What you do not do, most of the, I mean, I'm not speaking to you, like just people who are not practicing this. What they do not do is they do not use these skills at the same time together on purpose in a systematic way with a training plan. What they do is they use them sporadically when they, life requires them to be active, unintentionally. So it's like your ability to walk. Most people that are healthy can walk. They can even run.
Yeah.
But just because you walk all your life and you run sometimes will never result in your ability to be able to run any faster or longer or more effortlessly. It's the exact opposite. Even though you run your whole life and you walk your whole life, the older you get, the slower you will become, the harder it will be for you to walk long. But if at any point in time when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter, decide, I want to improve my ability to run longer or faster. And you start a 5K training plan or a marathon training plan at the age of 50, no doubt you will be able to run a marathon, but only in the moment when you decide to start to practice the skill of running in a systematic way consistently. Until you start doing that, your ability to run will not improve, even though you have it. And as long as you don't practice these mental skills that everybody has in a systematic, consistent way, they will not improve.
Yeah, it's consistency and in creating systems, I think, not only in your own life, but in anything that you're doing, whether it's fitness or mental mindset. I think creating those systems that actually work for you is a big part of being able to have success in those, knowing that there is constant struggles within it, but knowing that you're sticking to a process that you've seen results in. Is that kind of where you're getting at there?
I mean, that's a good way of summarizing a certain aspect. And I would say, yeah, having systems in place is definitely a requirement for certain parts of your life. So systems, I mean, I think the term,
Right.
and I'm not 100% familiar with that. That's actually a very elaborate, complex term. Like what that means is probably like not exactly what we mean right now with systems. Like it gets quite complex when you take a scientific approach. Okay. So when we use the word a systematic approach, that narrows it down very much. Okay. So
Right.
having systematic approaches to certain things. Okay, let's be a little bit more specific, just not to get into the realm of what does systems actually mean? Because I'm not 100% sure now. If we look that up, like that can entail a lot of things. A systematic approach in this case means, okay, you basically make a plan, or you get a plan from your coach, and preferably a plan that you just didn't pull out of thin air because for whatever reason you think that's a good plan, but it's based on science.
Yeah.
It's not based on just somebody's opinion, yours or somebody else's opinion. If the opinion is not based on science, experience, and facts, then the opinion is not worth a lot,
Right.
So when you have systematic approaches in place that are based on scientific evidence, well, now you are doing something systematically. There's a plan to it. You do it. I do it at this time and this many times and for this period of time and in this way. And there's going to be an effect of that. If you don't have a system in place and you might do the same things, there might be actually no benefit that you will be experiencing from it.
Right. Give me a little bit of your background when it comes to how you got into this space of mindset mixed with performance. Was it something that you saw at like benefiting you when you were playing tennis, or how did you get into this space? Like what really sparked your interest?
Yeah. Well, what sparked my interest was my inability to do it. my, my, my mind was not serving my best interests. Okay, let's put it that way. So my body was able to do many things very well if my mind would be not get in its way.
Right.
So I trained my body very well. I could have done it better, but my body was trained very well. This body had the ability to be very coordinated. This body was very strong, technically very, very well developed. And when it came, so the body could do, what it needed to do if the mind would not intervene with the abilities now developed, with the body's developed abilities. But that's what my mind was doing very often. Not all the time, of course, otherwise I would have been like a terrible player. But I was not the best I could be. I was not playing at my optimal level that I know I was playing frequently, often enough. And the reason was always the same, because I was confused, because something would upset me, because I would become anxious, because I would be uncertain, because I didn't have the right strategic understanding, or I had the right strategic understanding, but I wasn't able to pay attention to what I needed to do. So, okay, basically, it was a little bit of a shitstorm for me mentally. Not while I was experiencing it, it was normal for me. I didn't know there was any other way to live. But at one point in my life, after I stopped playing professionally, I actually then had like a real challenging episode mentally. I had a nervous breakdown for the first time in my life, not sports related, just relationship related.
Yeah.
And that was the first time where I realized whoa, my mind has a lot of power. It's just has a lot of negative impact on me, but it's just my mind. I had enough perspective that I realized it's not the situation that is causing me to have a nervous breakdown. It's my mind causing the nervous breakdown. So that was a key differentiator for me. That I was not blaming it on the situation. It was no, the situation is what the situation is. My mind is making it, way worse than it is. that experience was very powerful for me and very important and influential in my future development, because now realizing so intensely like how much power my mind has, eventually my mind came up with this thought of, wait, like if my mind has this much power over me in a negative way, why can I not do that in a positive way? I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, because I could easily like bring to mind something that's negative and I would feel that right away. Like I can remember something that I haven't done yet, and like I become a little anxious immediately. But if I think about something positive, like, I don't feel so positive immediately. Why is like the negative thing like so powerful? The positive thing is not just as easily available. That didn't make any sense to me. And that sparked a lot of interest in me in terms of like exploring the mind more. So this interest resulted in me talking to people about it and starting to look up things online and stuff like that. And then, once you get into this a little bit, you see like, oh, it's a whole world out there. Like until then, I was less like, stay with everything away when it comes to like psychology, psychiatry, mindfulness, just stay away from me. You guys don't know all what the fuck you're talking about. Like, I was fully in that package of like, don't mess with my mind. I was in one of those three.
Right.
So once I realized what potential there is, and that it's actually not something that you need to understand, but it's a skill that you have that you can train. No matter how bad the skill is, you can develop it, and you can develop that skill to a degree where you would never imagine you could actually get to. Then I was like, well, I want to have that skill, or those skills, to be more specific. I want those skills. And now I know that I can develop those skills. It's like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in all my time that I possibly can in developing those skills. I want those skills. I don't want to be a slave of my mind. I want my mind to be able to serve me, my interests, what I like to do. When I want to be happy, I want to be able to be happy. If I want to pay attention to the sunset, I want to be able to pay attention to the sunset and not to the email that this guy sent to me.
Right.
So when I started doing that, and these abilities, these mental skills improved to a degree where I noticed a noticeable change, like a significant difference than it was before, I was like, this is what I want to teach. Like, this is so much more powerful than anything else. And it supports anything in any athletic endeavor, in anything in life, really. But I'm limiting myself to sports, and I've been teaching tennis my whole life in sports, and I want to be able to help more people. And I was like, this is like what I have discovered for myself. Many people have discovered it so far already, of course, but there's very few people who have made the connection as to how you can actually implement it into sport and benefit your performance. So far, most people have attributed and used these mental skills and developed these skills in order to alleviate suffering. I become anxious, so I need to work on my mind. I experience depression, so I want to now have interest to develop my mind. I want to be a more compassionate human being. I want to develop my mind. But you can use those skills also to be a better runner, basketball player, and tennis player. So, because very few people have done that, and I have experienced that for myself, that became my entire focus. And of course, reducing suffering and being a better human being is not excluded from that.
Right.
But it's just not the initial focus.
Right. I think that perception switch of the way that we look at mindfulness, like you said, as a way to deter negative things. So we're already thinking of like, this is how I'm going to react towards a negative. I think the word there is react. You're putting yourself in the reactive state of, when I feel negative, this is how I'm going to combat it, versus what you're saying as, this is something that I can actively use to, benefit me in my performance, in my daily life, in my relationships. And I think that perspective change is so huge. You mentioned the sunset there, and I saw your post about this on Instagram, and I think it's really powerful. You can kind of explain what the post was about, but virtually it was, you know, taking in the moment, being actually in the sunset, watching the sunset, like taking in its beauty instead of having your thoughts go somewhere else. I think the big part of that is being present. And that's something that is one of my goals this year, focusing on how do we become present in such a world that is constantly pushing stimulus at us day after day. And you describing mindfulness as not necessarily having to fully calm the mind, but being able to be aware of these thoughts, I think is powerful. So how can we, as a society that's constantly being pushed with stimulus and our attention is constantly being grabbed for, how can we be more present in this moment through mindfulness?
Well, being present is one of the 3 skills of mindfulness. Yeah. Okay. So you can be present and not mindful, but you cannot be mindful without being present. You know, because you can be present right now and you're very present with, I don't want to feel like this. Right. I don't want to have thoughts in my mind. I'm present. I'm aware that I have thoughts in my mind. I'm totally in the moment, but I don't want the moment. Okay. So you're in a fighting relationship with the moment. If you're mindful, well, you are in the moment, but the difference is that you're now not trying to fight with the thoughts that you're having. You're trying to allow the thoughts to be there. Let me clarify also one thing in regards to this calming of the mind. There's a very good reason why there is this misconception of calming. You know, people think I have a calm mind if I meditate, which is the effect of using these 3 skills and developing and improving them is that there are going to be times when you will experience a calmer mind, but it's like the effect of using the skills. It's not the skill, you know? So it's like you're developing your ability to run better. You're training for a marathon. And now you need to carry the groceries up 4 levels to your apartment. Well, it's going to be more effortless, you know, and you're not out of breath. So you're physically calm and relaxed. But like, that has nothing to, it's just the effect of all the training that you're doing. It has nothing to do with the training. It has nothing to do with your, you know, running the marathon. So experiencing a calm mind is very rare for people because they don't do anything that could ever cause a calm mind. They're doing the exact opposite, like you're saying, the stimuli, social media, 6 hours a day, just scrolling mindlessly through Instagram and TikTok and watching one video after another of a human being so happy and ecstatic about how amazing they are, which has 0 to do with reality because they're not actually as happy as they seem to be. It's just they, you know, pretend to be happy, or they might be happy for that moment in time, and they don't show the moment in time when they're not happy, which is understandable, you know, but it clouds our perception, like what we think of other people. You know, people take pictures of themselves and obviously they edit them a little bit, or if they don't edit them, they take the best angle of the picture. So everybody looks as good as possible on a picture, and it's normal. Like most people don't want to post pictures of themselves where they think they don't look as good. It's a normal like thing to do. But the effect is that now there's only pictures of each individual that are like the best pictures, and it's not a representation of how they really look. But when you look at yourself, you don't see yourself only in the best light. You see yourself when you wake up in the morning. You see yourself when you're sick, you know, after you've been drinking one night or whatever. And now you're like, well, those people always look great. It's not even a conscious thought in your mind. It's just like, that's what you're seeing. So you kind of believe that somewhere. And you see yourself and it's not the same. And now you're starting to see yourself in a worse light than the others. Everybody is like a little bit better than you, and you're starting to be worse. And it causes you to be sad, of course, you know? So I don't even know how I got to that point where I just went on a rant. What was I talking about?
It's very, I think that information is very valuable because I love the quote, comparison is a thief of joy, which is what I think you're talking about there. It's all this constant comparison. Why am I not here? Why am I not doing this? Why is this person doing here? And we're relating it to someone's highlight reel, what they want you to see. not the real reality of the situation, not the real reality of life. That's why I love the medium of podcasting. I think it gives people the opportunity to hear these real conversations and know that, hey, we're all in this together as humans. Like, these are things that we go through, and this is how we can, work through life together, work through this journey together. So in terms of, we're going to switch a little bit towards the actual physical activity side of things. I think that, with mindfulness, visualization, we hear a lot of these things talked about how it's going to, progress our performance. And I think it's just slowly becoming something that is on the forefront of sports and performance. But tell me a little bit about the flow state. So this is something I'm very interested in. I saw that it was kind of mentioned on some of your things when it comes to mind size. And it's for anyone that's an athlete that's listening to the podcast. I know we have a lot of athletes listening. The flow state, if you've ever been in it, is one of the most beautiful things, right? You can get in the flow state during work. You get into it when you're running out on the field, when you're playing a game. Everything is tunnel vision, right? So it's this beautiful state of mind where everything falls away and you're so locked into the moment. How can we access this flow state more on command than just in situations where our adrenaline's up and we're in these hypersensitive situations? How can we access this flow state more freely?
Well, the answer, I will elaborate on it, but you can't access it just by the snip of a finger.
Right.
But you can definitely learn to access it through training. Okay, that's the short one. It has nothing to do with understanding what I need to do. It has all to do with training this ability to enter the state. Okay, in other words, to use certain skills that make up a flow state. So a flow state, it's a pretty common term by now. But there is a scientist called Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi who has actually defined what a flow state is very specifically. And anytime we're using like a term that people have certain associations with and it has a certain connotation, it's good to just put up a baseline. It's like, what are we talking about when we mean flow state? Because somebody else might say flow state and they mean something completely different.
Right.
So the flow state, according to Csikszentmihalyi, the way he defined it is that there is a set, I think, 7 or 8 skills that are presently active simultaneously. All of these 7, let's just say it's 7, it might be 8, have to be happening in order for you to be able to enter the flow state or to be in a flow state. Right. And if one of the 7 is not happening, then it might be still a state, but it's not a flow state. Okay. Right. So a flow state is a state where you just said you're totally locked in to what you're experiencing and your attention is not being drawn to other things. Okay. So that's it's one subcategory of concentration, which is called sustained attention. Effortless sustained attention is one subcategory within concentration, which is one of the skills of mindfulness. The next skill in flow state that has to be active is you have to be super attuned with what you're experiencing. So you're paying attention to something, and now you're not just have your attention on there and you're not getting distracted, but also you're noticing details like you have never noticed before. Like some people feel like they're in slow motion, like they watch the ball and it's so slow they can see everything. So now you are really present. Okay, that's being in the moment. Yeah. You are tracking in real time a lot of details, certain aspects of your current experience that you're able to detect that you normally don't detect. The third skill has to be that you are or another way, you're just totally cool. There is no fighting with anything that you're experiencing. You're not in an antagonistic relationship with anything that you're currently experiencing. You're just allowing everything to be as it is. The fourth one is that you have to be making decisions. If you're not making any decisions, then you cannot be in a flow state. The fifth one is that you have to be active and you have to be challenged physically or mentally just above what your like maximum or optimal level of performance is. If you're under challenged, you won't enter the flow state. If you're over challenged, if it's too difficult, you won't enter the flow state either. Right. And then there's like two more, let's say. Okay. So it's all these different set of skills. And when all of that aligns, okay, then you enter a flow state. Now comes the thing though, right? You might be like, you know, I've entered the flow state when I'm walking. Well, it's not a flow state according to Csikszentmihalyi, but what it is a heightened state of mindfulness. You are, remember the three skills. When you're being mindful, that means you're using your concentration, your clarity, and your coolness. So you're paying attention to something, you're noticing a lot of detail, and you're totally cool with what is happening. So that can, especially through training, but sometimes naturally too, can happen in a moment that these skills jump up. They're at a heightened level. And if you experience that heightened level, it's very pleasant to experience that. But it's like, why is that happening? What did I do? It's like, well, you didn't do anything, maybe just circumstances aligned, you know, but you can definitely practice these skills so you're able to experience that more often. And then they're very helpful in order to get in the flow state. But in the flow state, you have to do other things on top of that. You have to be active. You have to be making decisions. But even if you're not in the flow state, these skills can still heighten. And you can just be sitting or walking and or listening to me, and you're in a very heightened state.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing to experience. It really is. And it seems like a lot that goes into it. But like you said, those heightened states can be entered through just a few of those, and that concentration, clarity, and coolness of mindfulness. There was a study that I saw from a university in Taiwan that had to do with cognitive and behavioral function when it comes to racket sports. And this has always been something that interested me because I've seen a lot of these studies, but virtually it was two groups, 12-week phases for each group. First group did nothing. Second group of 16 kids, I believe, played ping pong, right? Racket. You playing ping pong for 12 weeks, and all of these kids in these groups had ADHD. So they did 12 weeks with one group, 12 weeks with the other group. Both groups tested out with better motor and behavioral functions improved when they were doing these racket sports. So I thought that was very interesting, and I was wondering if you had any experience with that as far as, you know, how you feel when you play tennis, or also just that body-mind connection that is so powerful that I feel like we sometimes, it could be right in plain sight, but we wouldn't really know.
Yeah. So, I mean, this kind of comes back to what I was saying, like at some point earlier when we were talking, where like everybody has those skills and uses these skills. Okay. Yeah. And for the most part, sporadically and unintentionally. But if you are developing a craft as an athlete or as a doctor or scientist or anything, right, then things change a little bit. So now when you develop, you know, racket sports, let's say it was tennis or squash or something, then these kids needed to pay attention to certain things, right? Like, for example, in racket sports, there's always a ball involved. So you need to watch the ball. And anytime you don't watch the ball, you're not going to hit the ball, obviously. And you don't need to, it's not even enough to just watch the ball like peripherally. You need to actually like really pay attention to the ball, which is your ability to focus, your concentration, your ability to direct your attention somewhere and to keep it there for however long you want. So let's say it's 5 seconds, 10 seconds each time the ball flies. So now they're developing that skill. Okay, so they're developing the first skill. The second skill, being present, being in the moment. What does that mean? You're tracking in real time what's happening. So it's not enough to just watch the ball. We just stick with the ball, right? With that example. You actually need to watch the ball and pay attention to the trajectory of the ball. So your brain is able to predict what is going to happen to the ball, and you know where to run, right? You're not consciously thinking about that. That's like your brain is predicting this outcome. And the only way it can predict that outcome is if it gets sufficient information. And the way the brain gets that information is by tracking the trajectory of the ball and the speed, the velocity of the ball, and the spin of the ball. And there might even be wind and so forth, right? So your brain is like, you need to notice those things. And if you don't notice them, then your brain will predict something completely wrong and you will like be far away from the ball. It's very common to happen. And then that's how you learn. What you don't need to pay attention to is the color of the ball. If somebody would really pay attention to the color of the ball, like they won't be able to predict, their brain can't predict the right way. So they're developing their clarity also, their ability to be present in the moment, right? And always coolness, if you're not trying to be cool with, you know, your ability not be able to predict very well, very frequently and so forth, then it takes your mind away the whole time. So they're also doing that somewhat. They're maybe not doing it just as systematically and intentionally as when you do a dedicated mindfulness practice in the moment, but nonetheless, they are using these skills the whole time. And that's why it's one of the reasons that sports in many ways has this beneficial impact on people, because you have to be present. You have to be here right now. You have to pay attention, and you can't be fighting with what is happening the whole time, or you can pay attention to what's happening. So that's my take on, you know, kind of analyzing how this could have been, where the benefits could have partially come from.
Right. When you break it down like that, it makes plenty of sense. Christian, where can all the listeners find you and, you know, check out some more of your stuff with Mindsize?
Well, Mindsize you can find on mindsizesports.com. So if that's interesting for you to develop for yourself as an athlete on any level, you know, if you're a pro athlete, if you're just doing running once a week or something, you can go through that program, and like you also get like certain practices up front to get a little feel for it. And there's a lot of reading that you can do, questions you can ask. And then for coaches, also some people might want to coach that, what I'm coaching. So I'm also have developed with my partner a teacher training program to be able to teach that to other athletes within your sport. So that's where I would send you. And then, you know, you can find me on Instagram at straka.la, where I just like post a bunch of stuff here and there. But, you know, really you want to go to Mindsize.
Awesome. And I know we have to go here soon, but I have one last thing that you could leave the listeners with. What is the best tool or something that they could use in their everyday lives today to start taking these steps towards mindfulness? Something quick and easy that I shouldn't say easy, but something that they can do to start implementing these things in their life, the action.
Yeah. So 2 quick things. One is make a plan. Okay. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate plan. Small, manageable pieces. Okay. Something that's easy to implement. So let's say every time you walk the dog for 1 minute, you will do it. Okay. So that's one plan. Everybody can do that. And if you don't walk the dog because you don't have a dog, then every time you step in the shower, okay, in case you're showering, then for the first minute in the shower, okay, you practice it. And then you just need to be able to know, what does it mean to practice? Okay. So that is where technical knowledge, like some instruction, needs to come in. But to not be too, you know, elaborate, let's say you use these 3 skills. So you direct your attention to anything you like. You're standing in the shower and you direct your attention to something you like. So let's just say you like the feeling of the water on your skin. So you direct your attention to the feeling. And then you use the second skill also at the same time, which is you want to notice, where do you feel the pleasant feeling? Like, is it on your back? Is it on your arm? Is it in different places? So now you're present, you're in the moment, and you're noticing details. And then you're using your third skill, coolness, by allowing just anything to happen. Maybe your mind is pulling you away and your mind is active, right? And you're paying attention to that. And you have a hard time paying attention to the feeling of the water. And you want to be okay with those thoughts. Allow those thoughts to be there, but then return your attention back to the feeling. So that's one example of like how you can use these three skills at the same time. You can do that obviously with anything. You just do it for 1 minute, 30 seconds, you just start.
I think that is the biggest part, is just to start. And Christian, thank you so much for your time. Very great conversation with you. I know we had that little hiccup there. I got a little exercise in between. Hey, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to keeping up with you in the future.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You're doing a great job. Thanks for having me, my man.